Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Subject to Change. This is Matt.
And this is Chad.
And we've had a pretty exciting week here. I've been sick and been working my new job.
Oh yeah.
Anything exciting happen with you, Chad?
Nothing as exciting as being sick and working a new job.
Anything mildly exciting? Or maybe not as terrible as those two things?
Going to the Smokies tomorrow.
That'll be fun.
Not for backpacking, but just a 3-day trip, stay in a cabin.
Oh, that'll be extra fun.
Yeah, take my girlfriend there for her birthday.
Happy birthday, Amy.
And
since you're the only one who listens to these,
we can
Easter
be
egg.
Guaranteed that she will listen to this.
So, happy birthday.
And yesterday was Halloween. Did some Halloween stuff yesterday.
In the rain, in the cold.
Oh, jeez, it was miserable.
I know. I didn't go out.
Yeah, did you pass out candy?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, I live too far out.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody trick or treats out there.
Someone knocks on my fucking door, I'm pulling a gun. Like, who the fuck are you?
I can't even imagine trying to walk down that road in the dark. Well, actually, I can't imagine that because I've done that before.
Yeah. My mom, she put up little lights on the trees. Like, there's solar lights or whatever.
Did she really?
Uh-huh.
To attract trick-or-treaters?
No.
Or just
so when you're driving down the driveway.
Was that just for me?
No, she did it for, I think, aesthetic reasons, but there's also the practicality of seeing while you're driving.
So I don't get lost next time.
Yeah. How many times have you been to my house at this point? Like 5 times? I feel it's not been that many.
No, but there was a long gap.
Yeah.
In between.
Well, it's a couple years.
And I kind of forgot. Yeah, it was a couple years. I forgot how to get there.
That's okay. It's understandable.
Yeah.
I mean, the same amount of time between me seeing you and I didn't get lost coming to your house. But it's whatever.
Hey, I'm right off 75.
Yeah. Behind the high school. I know. Anyway.
We also have an upgrade to our system here.
You wanted to talk about that? I was just going to let it be a secret.
Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag now, but I kind of wanted to mention it just in case this episode sounds weird.
We have another mic.
Yeah.
Chad has his own mic
if
now.
If this episode sounds weird, it's because we have 2 mics now.
Yeah, because since the beginning, we've been using my one mic and like sitting awkwardly.
Sitting about 6, our faces are about 6 inches apart on either side of the mic.
So this is, you're right. It does feel a lot more casual now.
Well, I was thinking at first that I would feel much more professional and like I need to be more
astute with it,
more coherent and more eloquent. But now that we're sitting in the comfy chairs, drinking beer, and we each have our own microphone, and we can kick our feet up, I do think I feel a little more casual.
Yeah,
maybe that'll be good.
No, I think that is going to be good because before it was starting to feel like, all right, we got to do this. It's our job now. Coming in, sitting in uncomfortable chairs in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of like our old conversations where we just sit in the nice chairs.
Yeah, and maybe that will be beneficial, or maybe we need the discomfort. It's like how when you're going to give a speech in front of a crowd, you kind of need the anxiety of it to help you perform well.
I don't know.
We'll see.
Okay.
In about an hour, which way it went.
I'm leaning more towards the casual is better for performance, but who knows?
I think so too. Let's find out as we delve into
society
topics.
Society. So we've kind of, we've been a little bit political the past couple of weeks, talking about society in different ways and political engagement. That episode actually just came out recently, but that doesn't really make sense because these come out every 2 weeks, or whatever. But that's not the point. I floated an idea to Chad the other day when we were trying to come up with topics about, it was in reference to, in my mind, it was a reference to our budgeting with our country and what we spend our money on and what kind of things are priorities for our society. And I wanted to have a thought experiment conversation about how we, Chad and I, or whatever, what we would spend money on, what we think society should strive for, what do societies strive for, and just talk about that in general. And because I have different ideas about what a striving, advancing society looks like, and I know that you probably have your own. But you said that you were thinking about it today and yesterday too.
Well,
so.
yeah, and I...
Or did you interpret my thing differently?
I hope not.
Because go ahead.
But I think that even if we did interpret it differently, I think that this might let us get into some of the differences that we have that we've kind of just danced around in previous episodes. And I think it'll also kind of let us go over some of the same territory that we did in the previous episode about the one about democracy, that I was really looking forward to that conversation, but I was very disappointed with my performance in it. That was a time I was tired and I was just frustrated, and I listened to it again, and I just didn't think that was a good conversation.
Yeah, no, we can do some rehashing of old
Well,
stuff.
I think this is naturally going to lead into a bunch of the same stuff that we talked about in that episode, which I think is a good thing because there's fertile ground for conversation there, but I feel like we just didn't really get to it in that other conversation. But I also think this is a thing that we've talked about quite a bit off the podcast.
Yeah.
And it'll allow us to get into that on the podcast now. Mm-hmm. At least if I'm interpreting your topic in the way that you are.
I think so. But I'm not sure how I want to begin, like where to begin with the topic. Unless you have unless there's something that you want to bring up initially that you, like some sort of topic related to it that.
Well, maybe. Let's try to figure that out here. I think when you pitched it to me, the first thing you said was something like, let's talk about the things that society should aim for, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And
I can look it up real quick.
Well, yeah, just like, I mean, how would you word that?
Let me see how I worded it in the original question. Hold, please.
Because I think that
that's not it.
It really depends.
Okay,
exactly what you mean.
What kinds of things should a society strive for? How would we use resources to help our society? And in that, I wanted to talk about budgets, what we could achieve, what we want to achieve as a nation, and rebuilding. And the reason, like the thing that sparked that in me, that whole idea, just to start with that, I guess, where I was coming from, is a large part of our budget, like the national budget, is used on the military.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the percentage of it, but it's some astronomical number. We spend more on the military than the next 10 nations, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, what if we used those funds instead of, waging regime change wars or doing whatever around the world? What if the Army Corps of Engineers invaded America and started rebuilding infrastructure here? Like, what if we used the military budget to do these sort of like democracy building things that we do in the Middle East or where have you?
Okay. In
like the worst parts of America that need infrastructure. Yeah. And that's what I meant about like resources and rebuilding.
Oh, okay.
Is that why aren't we striving to actually be the number one nation that we say that we are by using the capabilities and the resources that we have to try and do this around the world? Why don't we use it here? And in that, I wanted to, like, the whole striving thing is more of a long-term related to, because I've been really interested in the whole SpaceX thing recently, because they're building a new Starship that they want to use to go to the moon and to go to Mars and all this sort of stuff. And Elon Musk is always talking about how humanity needs to be multiplanetary and all this sort of stuff to survive. And I feel like space and NASA and all that sort of stuff isn't really seen as a priority in our society. And I was just curious what you thought about our current priorities. What kind of priorities do you think our country should have, or any kind of society should have, to become a better one, or to progress or what have you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a little bit different than
what you were thinking.
What I was thinking. Well, I don't know a whole lot about how the budget is spent, and I didn't do any homework on that.
Neither did I.
I think in general terms, anyway, I think I agree with what you were just saying, that just without doing any research on it, it does seem like it would be good to take some of that budget and spend it on infrastructure stuff. And that's stuff that I have no problem with that. I know I'm much less of I'm more of a small government person than you are, but that kind of infrastructure stuff is something that I don't have a problem with in principle.
So do you think, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up, and I guess this is an appropriate time to say it, is that when you're talking about society having goals, are you talking about goals that the government should be directing us toward, or are you just talking about goals that we should all, or goals that we should agree on, that the individuals in the country should agree on?
I'd say more of the latter.
Okay.
Like, it's not something that the government needs to prescribe.
Okay.
I feel more that it should be some sort, like, when I say society, I don't mean the government versus the people. I mean just in general the whole thing. What the people want the country to look like, how the government is going to implement change, what changes we're going to strive for. This kind of goes back to our democracy conversation when you talked about laws. Like if the majority of people wanted to change something that hindered people's rights, should the government do it or whatever? This is more of a, how should we move forward, I guess, as a society, as the United States, on the world stage, or as humanity or whatever. Like, essentially it's like, what kind of future do we want? And how would we go about making that happen? And for me, I think it's more about, and you wanted to bring up my bus analogy, but it's, how can we make the general populace think about the future in a way to where we want to move towards something, instead of feeling like we're being pulled in 12 different directions all at once.
It's a hard question for me to think about, because I don't tend to think collectively like that. I don't tend to think of what should we all do. Whenever I'm thinking, I mean, like when you talk about what should the future look like, I'm thinking about people thinking as individuals and what they want for the future. And I mean, fundamentally, I want that to be a question that individuals decide for themselves. So, I mean, like, there are times when we're talking about this stuff and I'm kind of resistant to the idea that we should all be moving toward anything together, just because or at least as a nation, because there's so many of us.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think that there should be some underlying goal or something to strive for as a nation that maybe we can all try to achieve individually, but we're kind of pointed in the same direction, but the way we get there is different?
I don't know. Because it depends on, like, the way that you're framing it as a goal. I don't think I do. I don't think I agree with that. If you're just talking about, like, a set of assumptions that most people in the country need to share, like, we all leave each other alone for the most part. We all follow the laws for the most part. We all drive on the right side of the road. We all respect the currency, that kind of stuff. If that's more like what you're talking about, then I agree with it. But I don't think it is what you're talking about. You're talking more about, like, having a goal and a place that we're going to go. Like, like we're gonna all agree, or at least most of us are going to agree to, go to Mars, or we're all going to agree to be the best manufacturing country in the world, or the most technologically advanced, or the most educated. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I agree that those would be good things, but I don't think I agree that there should be any kind of like I don't know how you would collectively move toward those things without coercing people in a way that I wouldn't like.
Okay. I mean, I understand that pushback on it, because you're I'm trying not to make it sound collectivist, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like where the government is saying this is the track that we're on, we all have to agree.
Right,
I want it more like the way I try to talk about it, or that I tried to bring it up or whatever, is trying to say how can we, from the bottom up, change public opinion, or not change it, but just inform public opinion so that we can all kind of agree, like, if we did this or we strive to do this, we would be better in the long term. Mm-hmm. Like, we could do, like, the other things that you brought up about, you know, social contracts and all that sort of stuff, all the things that you listed.
And I think we basically have that still.
Yeah.
Although I think that's kind of
that wouldn't necessarily go away if everyone was like, oh, you know, I'm going to go to my job and I'm going to, you know, pay my taxes and do all this sort of thing. But when, you know, voting comes down and it's like, oh, are we going to vote for this policy that's going to lead us closer to this goal that we want as a society or not? And I think that's we're related to a lot of the big changes that we want, like the climate, stuff related to the climate or income inequality or any of these like big ticket issues or whatever. We all have to kind of agree, like at some point it's going to be an A or B situation. Like if we go down the A track, it'll get us closer and closer to, you know, sustainable green energy or living on Mars or colonizing under the ocean or a million other things, but we can't necessarily do them all. We have to kind of pick and choose what we want to do. And I feel like society now is kind of in that where we're trying to do a million different things. And if we could narrow it down, we could do a lot better things, since we're not trying to focus resources across such a broad base of projects. Like if we could narrow it down to, instead of 1 million, to 10,000 things, and still agree that those are good things to do, that we could strive a little more. But we'd have to pick what those 10, like, I'm not trying to say we need to pick what they are, but I'm just saying that if we as a society were more, I guess, honed in on what we wanted to become in the future, instead of just, because I feel like with that mentality about, you know, staying in your lane, doing what you're doing, you know, take care of yourself, which I understand and is important. But I feel like that makes it seem like in America we have 330 million different goals. When you're trying to run like a country or a nation or a society, you kind of want there to be some sort of goals that are cohesive throughout all of those people, so that we're still in the same, like we're all striving for the same things as a nation, regardless of being individuals, that there are still things that we care about. Yeah, and I think that's harder and harder to do now.
I think maybe that's where we disagree. I wanted to say something about what you were talking about earlier about the narrowing things down to 10,000 things that we're doing. I have no problem with it if that's how things just go. If we just kind of organically make decisions on our own and decide, you know, if all of us decide that, you know, these things aren't very important anymore, we all decide to focus our attention on just these 10,000 things instead of the other million things that we could focus on, I have no problem with that. But then, yeah, when you start to talk about, I mean, you talk about there being, you know, 330 million different directions I kind of like that idea. That's kind of what I want. Because I don't know how much you want to get into that.
Sure.
But I mean, that's just kind of like my highest ideal for a nation is for it to allow everybody to do what they want to do. And maybe that's kind of the difference here, is that that's like at the top of the hierarchy for me, whereas it seems like maybe that's like, you know, second or third from the top of the hierarchy for
me,
you.
Yeah, for me, if I had to describe it, I kind of, I don't like the term collectivism or any of that, because it seems like people are mindless and they don't have an opinion.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like at the top, when we join into this social contract of a society, we're kind of signing on to say we're going to work together as a society to do something. And for me, it's like we haven't found that something yet. You say that we have, and saying that something is autonomy, and that's it. Like individual autonomy.
Well, I realize that that's not like the kind of thing that you're talking about that gives everybody purpose to moving towards something. So it's not, I realize it's not one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where in my mind, it's, okay, we are the United States of America or what have you. A core goal that we have as this nation is to be the number one nation in the world. Like we might not say it every day, but that's like in the back of our heads. It's like, we're America. We're the best country in the world for X, Y, and Z.
Right.
If you don't hold those values, then I don't want to say this like carte blanche, but you're un-American. Like that's an American value. And I feel like some other values that we should try to strive for in that framework is the greenest country or the most technologically advanced or whatever, like those things. And then the second or third step away from that is you can go about it in your own individual way with like, it's like, oh, well, I want to help with the green transition. I want to start a solar farm, or person number 2 is like, oh, I want to start a windmill farm, or I want to do this. Yeah. Like the government isn't going to mandate what you need to do to transition, but we all agree that this is what we're going to do because this is our value. This is our core structure.
Is the government going to mandate anything? Like what if, my biggest issue with this is, what if I'm just not interested in that goal? Like what if we're taking the example of we're trying to be the greenest country. What if I just don't really care that much about that, and I just want to live my own life, and my goal is something different?
I guess my question would be, are you hindering that goal?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, what if I'm not doing anything to infringe on anybody else's freedoms, let's say?
Then I think that kind of falls into that framework of like the second or third tier thing. Like we all agree that this is something like not like 99% or something, but a majority of people in this country say, to be the best country, we need to do this. And then we could fight about how to best get there. But then there will be people like you who are like, well, I don't think that's a goal that we should hold on to. Like, it's not that important. And then everyone else would be like, your opinion doesn't matter because the majority of us say this is actually a good thing. Yeah. And that's kind of my standpoint, is that we want to get not like a consensus, which you don't, another thing you don't like, towards some goal setting. Yeah.
Well, let me, this is going to back it up slightly, but earlier I was saying that, the ideal is having 330 million different things going on. Actually, I probably shouldn't say it that way, because I actually am really in favor of people finding other like-minded people and forming communities with them and achieving goals that all the people in this group want. I'm very much for that. A lot of the problem that I have with this is that I don't really think there are any goals that the majority of 330 million people are going to realistically want.
And I think that the issue that we're seeing now is with the groups that you just described is that they can get very insulated very quickly, and they can kind of push out the other groups that they're trying to coexist with. Yeah. And we see that the tribalism has kind of exploded recently because people are finding like-minded people and then they enter an echo chamber and then they never leave. And that's fracturing, I think, the larger, like, cohesive society that we try to live in, because there's all these little tiny, either cultural or whatever other fractured factions that exist, because the groups don't all agree on some sort of value.
And that's true. That's the dark side. You know, that's the flip side of the coin when it comes to that sort of thing. I mean, I don't think you necessarily must have that, but yeah, I mean, I agree that. I mean, I don't necessarily think that a community of people is an insular thing. I mean, you can have communities that interact with each other, and you know,
I'm just saying, without some sort of overlying, like, umbrella value structure that you can agree with other societies or communities that you might not integrate with, but you can still see, like, I'm in this community, they're in that community, but we're all on the same team in this value or this goal.
Yeah, for me, that's where the whole idea of we're all going to leave each other alone, you know, we're going to respect the law of the land, that's where that sort of thing comes in for me. So, you know, if you have some insular, let's say, religious community over here who believes really weird things, and, you know, they don't like outsiders, and they're in their little echo chamber, for me, as long as they're not killing anybody, and as long as they're not forcing anybody to believe what they believe, and as long as they're not
getting tax breaks.
Yeah, getting tax breaks, exactly. Trying to change legislation, as long as they're not doing any of that stuff, I don't care what they do. I mean, I have opinions about it. I might think that they're ridiculous. I might think that, you know, they're just terrible. But as long as they're not doing any of the things I just said, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, I can't. I want them to be able to do that. Even if they are an echo chamber, even if they are this creepy insular community that, you know, I don't like, I want them to be able to do that. And, you know, that's where when you start talking about, like, having the shared stuff, my opinion, and I realize there are holes you can poke in this, but my opinion is that kind of, you know, agreeing about the law of the land, I mean, essentially agreeing on the Constitution, you know, adhering to the Constitution, essentially that is the thing that holds people, that holds us together as a nation. And my point is that I don't necessarily think we need something bigger that we all agree on to move toward.
I think the Constitution and believing in those social contracts is more of a foundation and less of what I am talking about for myself.
Well, I think so too. Yeah, I agree with that.
Where we can all agree that this is how we're going to live in the society together, but that's more of just like how we're going to go about our day to day. You know,
right?
We're not going to walk into other people's houses.
Yeah,
we're not going to, you know, try to steal people's kids.
Right.
We're going to, you know, be a part of society in a lawful way. But that.
So what you're saying is that we need that plus something else.
We need.
And I think
that.
What I'm saying is that
that's all we need.
That's I think, yeah.
And for me, I think this kind of relates to what we were talking about. I think last time or the time before about the whole comfort of society. That we live in a society now where things are convenient, things are very comfortable. And there's like this existential feeling of like, what am I doing with my life? And people find meaning in varying ways. For a long time, it's been religion has given people meaning for, you know, tens of thousands of years. Community gave them meaning because it was more of like survival. Like, I have to protect my community. I have to protect my kids, my family. And that altruistic feeling can extend beyond my familial ties. But I feel like as that has kind of degraded, because that view of society is shifted to where we're not as religious and we're not as community driven.
And I agree with you that has happened. Yeah.
That in lieu of that, we need to find some sort of common goal to strive to as a society moving forward. Because I feel like those things like religion, how community used to be, they used to be related to either something that was beyond comprehension, like religion, like that's when life is over, how is my eternity going to be spent? And the community was very, very immediate. Mm-hmm. You know, the person in my home, my neighbors, my town.
And that still exists.
It does, places. Yeah. That still
but
exists.
I agree that has really loosened in the last, I don't know, 100 years. I mean, it hasn't really been that long.
No, and it definitely shifts. Phenomenon. It's different for different cultures. Like we it's kind of a known thing that Asian culture is definitely more family oriented.
Yeah.
Hispanic culture is definitely more family oriented.
Right.
And then certain other like subcultures of society have varying levels of how close they are with their family.
Yeah. But in general, American society, I agree that stuff has really loosened its hold on the populace over the last 100, 200 years, especially in the last couple decades, though.
And I think something that we need as a society to kind of assuage that feeling of, you know, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. You know, what am I going to work for every day? What am I striving for personally? And I think that something that instead of trying to find some new religious level thing, we could say as a community, as a nation or whatever, like, we're going to strive to do this. Like, you know, kind of all come together and say, this is the thing we're going to rally behind, whatever it is, and let that be our driving force. Like, it used to be religion, it used to be community, it used to be survival, but now it's some sort of goal-driven, this is why I'm going to work every day, because I'm trying to make the country get to, you know, let's say like Mars or whatever is the goal. Like, we're all going to pitch together, we're going to work together as a society, as this country, this nation of communities, to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. And everything that we do can be related to it or whatever, but it's like, being a part of this community, you know what you're working for. Like, you know what your existence is related to, because some people, I understand what you're trying to say with the individualism and all that sort of stuff. Some people don't get fulfillment just from having freedom of existence. I think a lot of...
Oh, right. I totally agree.
I think a lot of people need... That's not what you're trying to say?
No, actually. No, I don't think it is. No. I mean, because I agree with everything you're saying. I just think that it needs to be more local. I think my real only complaint with what you're saying is that you're talking about doing this as a nation of 330 million people, whereas I think we already kind of found the answer in this, and it's in local, smaller communities. And
I think that goes back to my original critique about how are we going to use resources to deal with a million goals instead of narrowing it down to 10,000. Mm-hmm. It's like, we could have all these communities with all these different goals that they've come to, you know, it could be states or towns or just ethnic groups or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I want it to be more voluntary communities. You know, I don't even necessarily look at it as something like that has borders or that has some kind of ethnic or racial element. I want it to be even more voluntary than that. I want it to be churches and clubs and just voluntary associations of people. But go on.
I was just going to say that I think
the problem with that.
I think the problem with that, one, is that people aren't as voluntary with those things as you think. Mm-hmm. That they kind of build their own borders inherently.
Yeah, that's true also, yeah.
And how do you get over that? How do you break through that?
I'm not necessarily saying that you must. I mean, I agree that it could be a town or a city or something like that. I mean, I have no problem with that. I was just adding, you know, voluntary associations or clubs or things like that. But one of my big problems with looking at it as a whole nation is, how many people do you think are actually motivated to do something for their nation as opposed to a smaller unit of organization?
I think it all depends on the time. I mean, if you look at the like the earlier parts of some countries, like let's say like the turn of the century, nationalism was very rampant. Was something that
You're talking about in the United States,
in Europe, and a lot of other places. Okay. Yeah, like pre-World War I, nationalism was was a very big social thing.
Yeah,
because it was seen as a good thing. Like, I'm going to do this for king and country. I'm going to do this for, like my brothers in arms and all this sort of thing. And it seemed it was like a more of a universal feeling where, we're all American. Yeah. We're all British. We're all German. We're all French or whatever. So these are our values as these types of people. And we're going to go on the world stage with those values. So that if you met an American from North Dakota, if you met an American from Florida or New York or wherever, you'd know that they were American because they all believe in the same values. They're all very nationalistic. Now, nationalism has definitely been seen with a lot of negativity recently. And even back then, like jingoism and things like that, because it was insulating in the way that like their politics, how they were treating minorities and things like that, or whatever. But underneath, like, aside from all that, there was still this feeling of like national camaraderie against someone else or whatever. It was like, I feel like nationalism back then was very much like us versus them nationalism, instead of striving to be the best that we can be nationalism, which I don't know if that has a different name, but the nationalism that I could see in the early 1900s, especially like pre-World War I, World War I level, is like, we have to go fight in this war because we're British and we're going to defend against the tyranny of the Germans.
Yeah. I'm pretty skeptical that most people are that way. Even then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, I agree that there's such a thing as nationalism, and there's such a thing as national pride, even, that I would say probably the majority of people I would say have national pride, but I don't think that that's what motivates people on a daily basis.
Not now.
Right. And I probably know less about it than you do about the turn of the century, but I remain kind of skeptical about that too. That it was a daily motivation for people. But
go ahead.
Talking about you were talking about maybe it's a different kind of nationalism to think, to the idea of let's all work together to make the country the best it can be. I have a hard time seeing people being motivated by that.
Really?
On a daily basis. Yeah. Some people will be, but I do think that most people are not primarily motivated by making their country the best it could be. And I think it would be really difficult, if not impossible, to persuade people to do that.
Okay. I understand that.
Yeah.
Because I think...
there's not really any way to... that's just a difference in opinion. There's not really any way we could figure that out unless we actually... it would be interesting to go out and do some kind of experiment on that.
Or like some market research on like...
Yeah. You can't really ask people about their motivations because people aren't always...
true
honest, or they just don't know.
And plus, I think one way we could look at it is like military service. Mm-hmm. That's usually a good indicator. But that's not the kind of nationalism I mean.
Yeah, right. I
because the first one I was describing is like, we have to protect the motherland,
right? And you're not talking about that. No. Right. I understand that.
Yeah. Just to clarify, mine is more.
I'm not accusing you of that.
No, I know. But for the audience out there, because there are people out there who are like, nationalistic for whatever reason, where they're like, America's the best country, and they don't. And I obviously said it with a certain accent just now, as pretty apparent who I'm talking about. But those types of people don't acknowledge the kind of ills or things that are wrong that need to be fixed. You know,
Mhm.
they just say, you know, we're the best country. We're always the best country. We don't do anything wrong, blah, 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 blah. But what I'm talking about is more of kind of like addressing the things that are wrong, realizing that we could be better, and then striving to be better.
Mhm.
And I think one of the reasons why, and this is kind of getting into my political leanings, why I'm for Bernie Sanders right now and have been, is because he's an American. He believes in American values, you know, and freedom and liberty and all those sorts of things. But he is not afraid to point out the things that are wrong
Mhm.
and the things that we should be striving to be better at, you know, like not being so unequal with money or unequal with health coverage, or, you know, how we have the millionaires and billionaires, but we have people who live on the streets, and like all this sort of thing, like how we can say that we're the best country, but we rank like 30th in, you know, country rankings or whatever.
Yeah.
And to say we are the richest country in the world, you know, we're the biggest military, all these sorts of things, but we could be doing so much better. And these are the things that I think we should be doing. And I think instead of being like a dictatorial type thing, like this is what I say and it's going to happen whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
You have to educate people and show them what we can fix, how we can fix it, why we should be striving for these goals, and then go from there. Because a lot of the stuff that he specifically is running on politically is, you know, politically viable because a majority of the electorate are for these changes. You know, they want to see these changes come down, like gun reform or making weed legal or a million other things. So it's instead of him becoming president or whatever and saying, regardless of how everyone feels about these things, this is what I think should be done, I'm going to change it. He's talking to people about, this is why I think it should be changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, shaping the societal view on these issues. Like if you go back 30, 40 years, people didn't think that way because they were in their own bubbles. They didn't have the right information or whatever. But now that, you know, we live in such a society where we can disseminate information and have these kinds of conversations about what we want to have changed, we can really shape people's opinions and educate them in a way to where maybe they do agree. Hey, maybe we should go to Mars. You know, you give them enough information, then that'll be something we'll strive for. When instead of in a authoritarian way saying everyone's going to work in the SpaceX manufacturer, we're all going to make spaceships. Okay, it's like when the ballot box comes up and says, "Oh, vote for Title II," it gives us more funding for space exploration and takes it away from the military. Let's say, even though those two are really tied together, you know, the Air Force gives money to them, but like people would go, and depending on how much they're educated, what they know, like the goals and things like that, you know, you can start to see a shift in what we're moving towards. But without the conversations, all we are is 300 million people doing 300 million things.
Yeah. Okay. I have several things to say about that. Let me try to figure out. There's a bunch of stuff to disentangle here. Let me try to figure out where to start. Because it's good. This is going in the direction I want to take the conversation anyway. Because I mean, we have a disagreement about how people are motivated. Let's just kind of move beyond that. And this is moving. You're talking about what I want to talk about, which is like how exactly you do persuade other people. So, you know, let's look at something. Let's just take one of these examples that you're talking about with Bernie Sanders. I don't know. Let's just say the legalization. Well, I don't know. That's not a very good one. I was going to say legalization of weed, but that's not a very good one. I don't know. You pick an issue.
So say Medicare for all.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, that's a good one. So let's say Medicare for all. And you want to you don't want to necessarily force everybody to agree with you in some kind of authoritarian way. Okay, so how do you go about how do you do this? I mean, like, what about the people who don't agree with you? How do you go about persuading them? And at what point do you say, okay, we have enough support, screw the people who still disagree, we're going to do it now?
I think it depends on why they disagree, and if it's a good enough reason, I guess. If it's like, I don't like it just because it's him, or like the people are like, I don't like anything, I don't like Obamacare just because of Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what he's proposing will help you. I don't care because Obama. Like, if it's some reason like that, then I'll just dismiss them.
Okay.
If it's some reason like related to how are we going to pay for it, it won't work as well as other countries. You don't know this, blah, blah, blah. Like all these, criticisms that it gets right now. You kind of just have to educate people on, either why those ideas are wrong, because some of them are, but just try and say, you have these qualms or, like whatever, these negative thoughts. And like it's outweighed by the people who think it's good. If it turns out that it's bad, I think that would necessarily change the opinion of all those other people and they'd want to get rid of it.
Okay.
And we live in such a society to where if something happens, we can always change it. Like, we don't have to live with anything in the way our society is run. So I would always...
It is very difficult to change things.
Well, I know, but it's not impossible.
Right.
Even the Constitution can be changed.
Right.
So I don't really want to sell it this way, but it's kind of like, we can just try it out. And if it doesn't work, we can go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
That's the society that we live in. We can test changes. There have been times when, like in other countries or wherever, where taxes were done or certain things were done and they're like, this doesn't work. So they got rid of it. We're not beholden to any change.
Right.
Like, for it to be that way forever, we can always change it.
I kind of agree with you there, and that's why I like the idea of states having more rights. States' rights. I don't like the term states' rights because states aren't things that should have rights. And people have rights. States have. There's an actual word for this.
Autonomy.
It's not that. It's a. I can't remember the actual word that I'm looking for here, but states' privileges or something.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
I actually do like the idea of, let's try this out in Utah, or let's try this out in Ohio and see how it does.
Yeah.
Although it's hard to say that if something works in one state, that it's going to work in the country as a whole, because when you try something out in one state, you can leave the state.
Yeah.
And you can easily leave the state.
Back to how I would persuade people.
Yeah.
I would explain to them the benefits.
Okay.
I would contrast, like, I would do the same thing that Bernie does now. Is like, contrast it to the current system we have. Current system we have leaves millions of people uninsured or underinsured. People die because they have to ration their medication because they can't afford it. People go bankrupt under the current system. And the new system proposes all that to go away. That, which is a lofty goal, right? Saying that everyone's going to be covered. You don't have to pay copays anymore. Your taxes might go up a little bit, but all that private tax of health insurance would go away. To try and say, like, and you get to keep your doctor, because the one thing that all the politicians talk about is like, I'm not going to get rid of your choice. It's like, you're not. Medicare for all is just who pays for my doctor's visit. Is it me? Is it the insurance company? Or is it the single payer? And under Medicare for all, it would be the government paying for it. So I would just still go to my own doctor because I don't have to worry about them being in or out of network. But I think one of the political processes is that we should use platforms or whatever to try and get to some sort of consensus. And we educate people with the benefits, We don't lie about what the possible detractments are, just to try and build a consensus to get things done. And I feel like that's how our government is run. But I think what hasn't been done for a long time, and I think is kind of changing now, is this idea of striving. Trying to be something instead of just saying, we're gonna do what we've always done and just kind of muddle through. We are going to try and strive to be some sort of society. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important for people's mental health.
I'm mostly in agreement, I think, with what you're saying. And like, I agree that when we're trying to reach a consensus or reach a majority on anything, we shouldn't be using any coercive methods. We should just be trying to persuade each other, educate people, give people the facts, things like that. I think where I'm maybe less hopeful than you about that method is that, and I don't even think this is necessarily a bad thing, it's just bad for your kind of view of things, is that I think that if you give people all of the facts, I'm not confident that the majority of people are going to reach the same conclusion based on those facts. I think that a lot of times the reasons that people disagree aren't because they don't have the same facts. It's because they have different values. It's because they interpret the facts in different ways based on their different values, because they value facts. They weight different facts differently.
And I think that's a problem with our multifaceted society, because I feel like there was a time where partisanship was less of an issue, where it was, I was just thinking about this, that if I could give you all the facts and say that this thing would be 100% good for you in your circumstance, but I'm not the same political party as you, that you would just dismiss it. I think that kind of thinking is more, is that insular community thinking, and not necessarily the higher minded societal value thinking.
I agree that some portion of the reason why people interpret facts differently is because they belong to different parties or different ideologies, and they just kind of adhere to them without thinking all that much. But I think that even if you could remove all of that, this problem would still exist. I think this is like a problem of biology. And again, I don't even think this is a problem, because I think we need it. I think we need people who value things. I think we need people with different hierarchies of values. So I don't. This isn't a problem that I would want to solve, but I think it's a problem of human nature, as opposed to. I think at bottom it's a problem of human nature, as opposed to a problem of politics. Okay. I think that if you remove, you take a bunch of people who, even if you take a bunch of people who belong to the same political party, let's say, and you present them with a series of facts about some issue, I'm not that confident that they're going to reach some kind of huge majority on the conclusion, or how to deal with the problem, or what to believe about it.
With that, even you'd have to think about what other communities that they're a part of, because even in, like, let's say the Democratic Party, there's still the class structure that exists within that. Like, most Democrats would say that the reason they're a Democrat is because they are more liberal, more progressive. More,
there's lots of little subgroups. Yeah,
but there are the people who are really rich and who are Democratic, the people who are really poor and who are Democratic, the people who have are, a certain ethnic group or whatever, and those values from that community will also shade the values that they bring into the other community.
Do you think that if you removed all of those kind of differences, that people would generally agree on facts if you show them? Okay. Well, there's another fundamental difference, I think, between.
I think that people are only against certain facts when it goes against some sort of community that they're a part of, even if, like, the big thing right now that we're dealing with, especially with this primary, with the Democratic primary, is that Bernie Sanders is very much for the working class. You know, people who make, like, say, $70,000 or less money, or $70,000 less or less every year. Working class people, poor people, multiracial, whatever. And a lot of his proposals are saying, well, we have to redistribute the wealth, the hoarded wealth of the uber rich, who may or may not be Democrat. Like Jeff Bezos, I think if he had to pick a political party, he'd probably pick Democratic.
Yeah.
But so. He doesn't agree with those policies because they adversely affect him. But even though that they would generally affect more people, he's against it.
Like, are you essentially saying that that the essence of a person is the combination of groups that they belong to?
Or I don't think that they belong to necessarily, but I think that their list of labels or whatever, I think is,
Well, how about here? Let me give you an example that I think will make you agree with me.
Sure.
What if, okay, so let's say, let me give you, I give you some series of facts. I give a bunch of people some series of facts about, we're all going to live together and it's going to be a big party. You know, you show those facts to extroverts and they say, oh, that sounds great. I love being around people. I'm energized when I'm around people. I don't like being alone. I feel weird when I'm alone. I love it. Introverts are going to look at those same facts and say, oh my God, that sounds awful. Okay. I don't like being around people. I need time alone. I need my privacy. And I mean, my argument is that those are not in any way socially constructed, that those are just biological differences between people. What do you think about that?
I don't know what you want me to say. I agree with you.
Do you think...
But I think... No, here. Let me go back to what I was saying about Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Let's say someone who makes $10,000 a year is a Democrat. Jeff Bezos makes billions.
$10 billion a year, whatever.
10 billion. He's also a Democrat.
Right.
They both agree on certain social policies or whatever.
Okay.
They're more Democratic than Republican.
Okay.
There's a Democratic proposal saying, "Oh, we need to tax the wealthy to help the poor." The poor person's going to say, "Oh yeah, that's a good thing because I really need a lot of help." But Jeff Bezos is going to say, "No, fuck you," because he's in the rich class, which is a subculture that he's a part of.
Yeah.
And even though that they're a part of this bigger one, since they are a part of something else, they can't agree. Even though the facts say if we redistribute this wealth, it would help more people and would be better for society.
I don't even agree with that. I mean, I agree that there's going to be a lot of poor Democrats who think that, but I don't think they all will. I think some of them will say, no, maybe they're the more classically liberal, of a more classical liberal bent, and they're going to say, no, I disagree. That's, the government shouldn't be, that's a misuse of the government to do that. I'm liberal in a lot of other ways. I'm really socially liberal, but I don't agree that the government should be, taxing the wealthy in this way or whatever.
See, I would like to meet your classical liberal poor person.
Yeah. I mean, what about me? I don't have that much money.
Yeah, but well, do you know which like median class you fall into? Are you like lower middle class?
What are they?
Like lower class, lower middle class, upper middle class.
Do you know the cutoffs?
Roughly? Yeah, it's like I know you're not upper because that's like that's closer to like $100,000.
Yeah, I'm not in there.
I would say that you're probably between lower middle class and middle class.
Probably.
Where I fall into lower class.
I'm probably in there, yeah, without divulging how much I actually make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, can we go back to my example?
Yes, we can.
Because all I wanted to
Because
what I'm trying to demonstrate with my example is that not all of a person's beliefs or interpretations are based on the social groups that they belong to.
Yeah, but an extrovert and an introvert would inherently be in certain social groups.
But do you think that they are? Do you think that the fact that they're an introvert or an extrovert is a social thing or a biological thing?
Well, that's kind of because those things inherently deal with how social you are. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Do you think people are born as introverts and extroverts, or do you think that people are socialized into being introverts?
I'm not sure. I'd probably lean more towards biological.
Okay.
But I think that not knowing all the intricacies of child development and how that can change someone from maybe being inherently extroverted
and I
to
don't
introverted.
Either, but I would think that it's mostly a
I would say that people are probably more inclined to be one. I mean, I've met people who at a certain point in their life seemed to be one way, but then changed and seemed to be another way.
I know. I accept that too.
So I think that might be a hard sell, like on a biological, not biological thing.
Yeah.
But I understand what the point you're trying to get to is that not everyone's identity is just the social groups that they're a part of.
Right.
That there's something else there.
Yes.
But I think that it's not as separated as you're trying to say. Like,
no,
the person goes into those social groups because of who they are as a person. So it's they're linked.
I agree.
Like an introvert, if they were, being true to who they are as an introvert, wouldn't do extroverted group things.
Right.
Like they wouldn't be a part of those social groups because of who they are biologically. Right. And I think that like a white person can't be a part of Spanish people are white, but like certain subcultures that are insulated because of their ethnic whatever. Like you can't just be a part of that if you're not a part of that ethnic group inherently.
Okay. Well, the original...
Or I can't... back to what I said about being the class structure.
Yeah.
I can't be a part of the rich class as a group when I only make 10 grand a year.
Okay.
That's not biological or anything else, but it's like I can't choose to be in a group that I can't be in.
Right.
So someone can't... I think that the groups that we are in is more related to who we are as people and less of what we essentially choose.
Okay.
So it's not really a choice. Like you said, is extroversion or introversion a choice or is it biological?
Right.
I think that the social structures that we get involved in are less of choice and more of just what we are going to be drawn to because of who we are biologically.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. But the original point, though, that I was trying to make is that what I was trying to say is that the way that people interpret facts and the way that people value things, people's value hierarchies, or however you want to say that, I don't think that those are entirely socially constructed.
I don't think that they're socially constructed, but I think if you looked at someone's social hierarchy or like whatever groups they're a part of, you could know, like our first conversation about labels.
Yeah.
If you knew someone's labels, you could probably discern how they will interpret a certain set of facts.
Probably with better than 50% odds, yes, but you don't know for sure.
No, but because there's a link between how they'll think and the groups that they're involved in.
Yeah.
I think it is better than chance that you can choose, that you'll know if you met a evangelical Christian and they were presented with evolution. Are they going to be more or less likely to believe that that's true based on that?
I totally agree that you have a better than average chance.
And I think the reason that they are a part of that group is because they're biologically more hardwired to believe that thing than the fact that evolution is real. Evolution is real. Evolution is real.
Okay, so all of that, I think I agree with all of what you're saying right now.
Okay.
But what I'm getting at is that even if you take people who are identical in all of their group membership and you show them a series of facts, I still think you're going to have some people who interpret those facts in a different way. Maybe 75% of them or something kind of come to the same conclusion, but I still think that not all of them are going to, because of their values, partially because I don't think that their value structures are entirely determined by the groups they belong to.
I think that, well, I don't think this is true. I don't think this is inherently true, but I feel like people are trying to make that a fact. People are trying to say, if, let's say we went to like the evangelical Christians and we presented them with something and 75% of them agreed and the 25%, not 15, 85% of them agree, 15% don't, that the 85 would say to the 15, you can't be in this group, because to be in this group, you have to agree with this. So they would ostracize them instead of just saying, oh, we can agree to disagree. Yeah, maybe. They would say a core tenet of this belief system is this thing.
Yeah.
And you can't be a part of it, whether or not they believe that they should be. And I think that group fracturing has been happening a lot recently. Like with a very prominent one that we dealt with is the new atheism.
Yeah.
Like that started out as sort of a core, these are the things that we kind of agree on, but it wasn't really that strong because to make atheism a foundational thing doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
But we saw a lot of fracturing in there, saying like, oh, you're not all feminists. Oh, well, we can't agree with you. You don't all believe in this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying now too.
Okay.
But my original point is I'm less...
I understand what you're saying, but I'm not really countering it, but I'm saying that when the group is... Okay, what I was trying to put across to you is that when those divisions are found inside groups, that causes fracturing.
Yeah.
Because of how things are now. Because there aren't any there aren't any hierarchical value systems to keep the groups together. And that's my whole thing, regardless of where this went, is that I think as a society that we, in any society, we should strive for something. That just running on 300 million individual directions isn't conducive to societal progress, in my view. That 300 million of us doing 300 million different things isn't the best that we can do for society.
Okay.
If we want to say that we all are a part of the same entity. And what I would say to that is maybe make the United States multiple countries, or make the states more autonomous so that there's 50 little countries or something, instead of trying to say that 300 million people are going to be an entity.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of where I was. I mean, I don't think we necessarily have to fracture into actual different political entities, but that's kind of what I was heading, though, is that I think 330 million people is too large of a group to reach some kind of consensus on where we should collectively go together.
And I'm saying maybe we shouldn't be a country this big.
Okay, maybe. I mean, like that's a fair enough thing
to counter that.
That's a fair enough thing to say. I wanted to go somewhere else because we kind of, we kind of talked about neither one of us want this to be done in some kind of coercive manner, and then you're more hopeful about education than I am. That's basically all we were trying to say there, is that I'm less hopeful about everybody agreeing based on educating us in the same way, because I think people have different value systems and that they're based partly on their biology and on things other than their group memberships. Where did I want to take it? One of the things I'm worried about is, what do you do with people who don't agree? I know we've talked about this before. As long as people are...
I think it depends. If they don't agree and are actively fighting against it, or if they don't agree and are just not participating.
What if they're actively... I don't know. what if they're actively fighting against it and yet they're well within their rights? You know, like, let's say that you want, well, let's go back to your Medicare for All example, since that's kind of what we're running with. If I'm out there arguing against it, is that what you're talking about?
I think if you were being truthful and just like upplaying the disparities and downplaying the advantages.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So what would...
As long as you're not lying. Like, if you're not actively being, like, disingenuous.
Well, okay, what if I am being disingenuous? What are you going to do to me?
Get rid of you.
Yeah, that's what I don't like.
Put you in the gulag.
Like, seriously, though.
No.
Seriously.
I mean, I hate this argument, because it's mostly from the right, but it's like, if you... Like, someone said something about, this is kind of shifting, but the wealth tax. Mm-hmm. If we put the wealth tax, it's going to create capital flight.
Yeah. Where
rich people are going to leave.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, bye.
Mm-hmm.
Just go. Bye. We don't need you. Like, you're causing more problems than you're fixing problems.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that same thing to the healthcare question, because I feel like it's less of a divisive thing. Mm-hmm. I think the wealth tax is definitely more divisive.
Well,
but I think, like, I don't want to tell, like, then just leave.
Yeah. Well, what would you tell them then? Because it's a different situation. Because in the situation with the wealth tax, people are saying, I will willingly leave.
Yeah.
And you're saying, okay, see ya.
Bye.
Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out.
Yeah.
Which is, this is a fair enough thing to say, even though I disagree with the wealth tax.
But with the other people,
yeah, like, if I want to stay here. I don't like Medicare for All. I'm out there arguing against it. You think I'm being disingenuous. What do you do with me?
I think in that point, we just have to work more on gaining consensus without you.
Okay.
And that things are going to change.
That's,
So,
but you're not going to do anything to me.
No.
Okay. That's fair enough.
No, because from my point of view, or the point of view of the thing that I'm trying to promote, if it's something that's successful or popular enough or can actually gain a consensus, then I don't need you to be in that umbrella.
Okay. I mean, that I agree with.
For it to change.
Yeah. I mean, what you're basically saying is that your ideas are
better,
powerful, and your ideas are better, and they're going to convince more people, and I'm going to be out there screaming at the top of my lungs, and people are just going to ignore me because they think I'm an idiot. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay.
Or let's say, like, you convince some people that I would just have to counter. But
there's like 10 of us or something.
Even then, just have to, keep the channel open and just say, like, well, he said this about that. That's not true because da-da-da-da. Yeah. He said that. That's not true. Or he's blowing this out of proportion. That's where the whole counter narrative thing comes from. It's like, you're spouting off all this stuff and I'm allowed to explain why you're wrong.
Yeah, right. I agree. And I think I agree with you, as long as this can seriously be done without infringing upon any of my basic rights.
I think it does. I mean, we don't live in Russia.
Right.
It's not like I'm Putin and I'm throwing you literally in a gulag.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we...
No, like I was talking about before in another discussion about dissent and how it's important and how, if the majority of people made a law that, said throwing gay people off buildings was legal, people would have to fight against that, and try to change opinions. We can't just, try to overthrow.
Yeah, I mean, that we should. We're running too late to get into that, but I do think that's a different situation than Medicare for All, because that's something that actually violates the Constitution, as opposed to, I guess you could argue that Medicare for All does, and some people would, but I mean, I think that. I wouldn't necessarily argue that, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. But
okay,
I actually think that's a really nice example, because it's not something that is violating people's basic rights. Not really, anyway.
It's violating your choice to choose what insurance you want.
It is, depending on how it's. I mean, I might argue that depending on how exactly it's instituted, but I mean, it's a fairly clean example anyway.
Yeah. So in closing, for me, if you were ready for closing remarks.
I think so.
Is there anything else that you wanted to
No, I think that...
broach?
I don't think there's any loose ends anyway.
All right. For closing remarks for me, I'm not for wholesale collectivism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want authoritarian dictates about what we need to strive for as a country. That's not what I'm asking for.
Mm-hmm.
What I want, and what I think does happen in this country, but I want it to be done more, is changing the political discourse and having society strive for something.
Mm-hmm.
Having us have a common goal as Americans or as people of the earth or whatever to try and shoot for.
Right.
And I know it's hard to gain a consensus, but I think what I want is consensus through education, consensus through discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that having some sort of, esoteric value that we as Americans can shoot for would be beneficial to society, because then we would be better educated, but also more willing to think about how we use our resources, what things that we can do to kind of move towards that goal, whatever that goal is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we live in a society where everyone can do whatever they want, not like you can't do that, but not to where I want to tell people they can't do whatever they want, but where people are like, well, instead of, streaming or whatever, I could go help further my society towards this goal. Like, yeah. I don't really like how individualistic we've become as a society. I kind of wish we were more community oriented and less divisive. But the way that we combat that is to try and do universal things and try and educate people on why, consensus in a cohesive society is better for everybody instead of being fractured.
Okay. And I agree with you on I agree that people should strive toward, I agree that people should belong to communities that are striving towards goals within the community. But I'm very, and I have no problem with what you're saying about, about large collective goals. And, if everybody if all 330 million people in the United States tomorrow decided that they all wanted to work on the same goal together, I think that would be great. All I'm worried about is coercion. And I'm much more pessimistic than you are about the possibility of that happening, though. I don't think that will ever happen. I don't think 330 million people are ever going to agree to move in the same direction on some major issue together. And I want people to be able to disagree and to dissent without being
thrown in the gulag.
Well, yeah, thrown in the gulag or thrown in jail or exiled or tortured or anything. I do think that the highest value of a nation should be to give everybody the freedom to pursue what they want to pursue. But I do also think that it's good for most individuals to look for a community where they can join like-minded people in achieving some goal. I'm just very I'm skeptical and pessimistic about that happening on very large scales.
And that's why
I don't want it, and I don't even want to go close to doing it against people's will.
Okay. And that's why I think the United States should be 3 countries instead of 1.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting idea. It's something that I've thought about before a little bit, but
probably not 3, probably like 6.
What about 50?
Nah, probably like 6. I would do it more regionally.
Yeah.
I would do it regionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like California might be its own, Texas might be its own, but everything else would be a regional thing. We could talk about that again.
Yeah, it's not something I've given a whole lot of thought to, but I mean, I'm not totally opposed to that idea. Especially it's an interesting thought experiment.
The South will rise again.
Yeah, that's a weird note to end on.
Anyway, thank you for listening to Subject to Change. And again, happy birthday, Amy.
Yes, happy birthday.
And
hopefully we had a good trip.
Yeah, I think you will. Usually do.
Yeah, we usually do.
But anyway, thanks for listening. Anyone who listened, this has been Matt.
Yeah, thanks for listening. This is Chad.
Have a great night or day.
Talk to you next time.